I love remakes. I recently played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and it was awesome. It was amazing. It was such an incredible experience. I cried my eyes out at the end. I played FF7 Remake when it came out in 2020, and I loved it to death. One of my favorite games of all time. Persona 3 Reload was another game that just made me bawl my eyes out with how beautiful it was. RE4 Remake was really awesome, and then also RE2 Remake when it came out in 2019 was also just an incredible horror experience that I still treasure to this day. I understand that remakes are cool, they're awesome, and I love remakes myself. I also understand that we all have our own loves and biases, so we all will have our own feelings when it comes to our own favorite games being remade. One of the things that we will see sometimes, even with myself, is there is a kind of hypocritical nature to all of our feelings, where we're like, I have no problem with this game getting remade, but my game that I love? Stay away, buddy. That happens all the time online, and sometimes we have to just realize that we have our own biases, and that's fine. There is this feeling with remakes, sometimes people are like, oh, it's gonna ruin the original. Never will. The original will always be there. Yes, it probably won't get as much attention, but for you as an individual, that original game that you love will never leave your side. It will always be there. So indulge me as I discuss why I think that a certain game that I love that was announced as a fake announcement that sparked a huge discussion online, shouldn't be remade. Even though I will still play it. Because I'm kind of like that. I'm wired like that. I don't want to spend €80 on your remake, but by God, I probably will. Resident Evil Remake by Shinji Mikami is a remake of a game by Shinji Mikami called Resident Evil that came out on the PlayStation 1. It's a remake of a game that was already an incredible horror game that really made everything that Shinji Mikami wanted to do with the original game a reality, and how incredible this looks on the GameCube. And the GameCube was a powerhouse, but how incredible this game looks still carries over to this day. Resident Evil Remake is still a beautiful game and has so many mechanics that are still used in almost every horror game to this day. It is a perfect game to me. And a lot of people say, Calvin, there's no such thing as a perfect game. Well, I say, make me believe that. Make me. Fight me. I don't care. Fight me. I'm going to say it's a perfect game. There's plenty of perfect games. I think there's perfect games out there. Nier Replicant is a perfect game to me. Shadow of the Colossus, the original version, a perfect game to me. And you're not going to change my mind on this, so don't even try. There's my biases coming through as well. For me, I don't look for the flaws in games unless I see them. They have to be pretty glaring for me to be like, that's a flaw, that's a flaw, that's a flaw. I don't like to look for the flaws in video games. I like to look for the good aspects in video games, and that makes me kind of silly sometimes. That's fair enough. You know, if a flaw comes up, obviously I'll talk about it, but to me, Resident Evil Remake doesn't really have any flaws, in my opinion, especially in the modern versions of these games as well. There was a rumor recently about Resident Evil Remake being remade, a remake of a remake, and it was an April Fool's joke, clearly. They're not going to leak a Resident Evil Remake announcement on April Fool's. That'd be silly. But it sparked a discussion online that I really thought was interesting. A lot of people were saying, hey, you don't need to remake this game. It's already really perfect. It's on modern consoles. It's in HD on modern consoles with modern controls and still has one of the most incredible stories and one of the most incredible horror video games ever created. But then there was people like adamantly talking about the original game as if the mechanics in those games that were dedicated and actually made for those games with thought and intent are flaws now or limitations of the time, which is kind of crazy to me because if you play Resident Evil Remake now, you realize that those things are not flaws. They are intended mechanics that Shinji Mikami and the rest of his team wanted to put in those games. Obviously the rumors are fake, but I still want to talk about it today. It's not going to matter in the end, but I still want to talk about it today. Today, Calvin is going to have a rebuttal for a bunch of flaws, quote unquote, that are in one of my favorite games of all time, and I hope you guys enjoy this.
Resident Evil.
Tank controls and fixed camera angles. This is something that I can't get people making fun of or not liking anymore. And I totally get that if it's not for you, that's fine. For me, this was like an ultimate horror experience. Tank controls and fixed camera angles are what makes the game special. It allows devs to control your perspective of the game and control the player without actually taking control away from the player. You still get to move, you still get to explore, but they will show you what they want you to see very early on and make it very dynamic and interesting without having it feel like they're making a cutscene every 2 minutes to be like, hey, look at this, look at this. You get to see it for yourself while actually exploring. while in other games you might have to like run around in circle in a room to click on everything. This game really does allow you to see like jars of different things, or like different puzzles from their perspective, or show you like zombies from their perspective. There's scenes in Resident Evil where you will leave a room and a zombie is now at the end of the hallway and it's right up in the camera and you're at the end of the hallway, and it makes for a much more scary experience. Sometimes with the tank controls, you're walking down the hallway and intendedly so, you will hear a zombie moan. And that is a horrifying experience. You can't see the zombie yet, and that is 100% intended. It's not a limitation. We can say it's a limitation to the cows come home. It's one of the most beautiful intended horror experiences that I really feel like should be brought back for more horror games, in my opinion. Narrow hallways. What is up with people saying narrow hallways are a flaw? This is what makes this game beautiful and scary. It creates a tense atmosphere where you have to be smart about escaping enemies or fighting enemies. Sometimes you'll be locked into a hallway or backed into a corner, and that's the whole point of a horror experience. You're not going to get a perfect game that's tailored towards your gameplay experience. The fact is, in modern horror games, yes, I understand that a lot of hallways are like triple wide for 3 people being able to walk through one hallway. But that's not what I kind of look for in a horror game. What I love about Resident Evil Remake is that I actually have to think about, if I go down this hallway now and there's a zombie at the end of this hallway, I might get grabbed. If I either kill him, I risk getting grabbed, or I go the other way. That is a terrifying thing. It makes me feel scared to know that there's this tense choice that I have to make. You can either just go down here, get better with learning your surroundings. There's no dodge roll. You actually have to face the enemy or move around them in a certain way. And it makes for that really, really scary horror experience. When I heard people saying that like narrow hallways was a flaw, it's like, you're saying that like an intended design choice that still works to this day is a flaw, and I just completely disagree. Save files. Having limited save files in games for some people can still be kind of considered a flaw. But for me, personally, I can understand this one more than anything else. I can understand people saying, hey, I kind of just want to be able to save whenever I want. It makes me feel better about the game, and it doesn't really change much. But for me, it kind of does. It also changes the way you look at a save room. The save rooms in Resident Evil games are one of the best inventions ever in video games. It is a feeling of respite and rest that you can have that makes you feel safe in this scary, scary world. That doesn't happen much in many horror games. And in the save room, you also have to think about, okay, I feel safe now. I have to save strategically. I have 3 save files. If I save now, then I can go down to this area and save, and then I still have 1 save file before the boss. It makes you think about everything in a strategic way. It's I have 1 more save coming up. Maybe I will save, or maybe I'll save it for when I have to do this or do that. There's always this thing in the back of my mind. It's like it makes the video game more strategic and more fun. And choices are what make horror games, in my opinion, terrifying and scary.
Hey, Wesker, where's Chris?
Jill, no. You don't want to go back out there.
The dialogue. Man, I don't care. I don't care if it's not great. It's a game that like was from like the early 2000s. Of course, it's not gonna be absolutely fantastic, but also at the same time, it has a charm to it. Like, it really does have a charm to it. And I don't know, like, it doesn't bother me. I can totally get not liking the cheesy dialogue, like Jill saying Jill's sandwich, or the dialogue at the start of the game, Chris, this way.
Chris, this way.
But still, it doesn't bother me. I think sometimes games are allowed to have a charm to them and a little quirkiness to them. I think having a game being too perfect can make it imperfect almost instantly.
Barry!
What is it?
Look out! It's a monster!
Let me take care of it.
Another flaw people say is you can't fight some bosses and you can just run past them. That's what we call a choice, and in horror games, choice is scary to me. If you play Silent Hill 2, there is a choice all the time as well, where you can either destroy an enemy, run away from an enemy, or hide from an enemy, and that choice builds tension. Removing that choice means you have one thing you can do. I can either fight this, I have to fight this boss. No matter what, I have to fight this boss. To me, it removes the dynamic nature and the kind of like very lived in nature of Resident Evil Remake. Where Resident Evil Remake feels like, because of its incredible level design, feels like it's real. It feels like the whole mansion is connected and real. The fact that I can avoid some boss battles just means that there is thought that is put into this game. You're not leveling up by fighting bosses. You can avoid bosses altogether. Yes, you'll probably not get some cool items out of not fighting some bosses, but the whole point of that is literally just to give the player a choice. And the reason why to me choice is scary is because it makes you think. You have to think in the moment while you're scared. Should I fight this tiger boss? Should I fight this shark boss? Should I fight the titan? Should I fight Yawn at this moment? They're not flaws to let the player choose their own adventure. It never should be a flaw to give people choice in a horror game, because to me that's what creates tension. It creates the choice in the person's head. It makes them mull it over. It makes them like go panic in most cases. And that's what makes horror good. And the last thing that I saw people say is that it needs to have a stronger focus on horror, which like I never get this critique at all. The lighting in this game is incredible. It's really just to die for. The setting itself is absolutely beautiful in terms of a horror setting. It's a haunted mansion with some underground science labs and some graveyards and some really cool abandoned shacks. This is a critique I just never understand. The idea of Crimson Heads coming back to life, a zombie that you killed earlier on, if you don't set them on fire, they will come back and as Crimson Heads and be twice as fast. The moaning of zombies that you can't see in the game, the spiders in the game. And honestly, like, I really feel when people say make the game scarier, what they really mean is make the music go boom boom and make me run from an enemy that's chasing me. I want a chase scene all the time. Give me a chase scene. The chase scenes in Resident Evil Remake are natural. They let you run away from an enemy, but it's a natural thing that happens in the world. It's not predetermined. It's not something that is decided upon. It's not scripted. It is something that happens in the game. And yeah, there is scripted parts of the game, don't get me wrong, but once the scripted thing happens, you are kind of free to move around that world and decide whether you want to fight them or run away from them or anything like that. I really feel like people are saying make the game scary. This make it louder. Make more jump scares. And that's not what I really want. Outlast is a cool horror game, but not every game needs to be Outlast. Not every game needs to be I need to run away from these characters or these enemies. And not every game needs to be that. I will pay $80 for this game if it is remade. But I could also pay $20 right now, which I shouldn't have to because I already own Resident Evil Remake on every single console. But you could right now can play $20, and sometimes it's even on sale for like $6 on the Switch. And you can get Romer's favorite horror game of all time. It's still beautiful, the story is still scary, the setting is horrifically delicious, even to this day, and the bosses are so cool as heck. You can play one of the best games ever created for $20, and it still looks incredible. I played it on the Switch, I played it on the PlayStation, I played it on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, I played it on the Xbox, I played it on PC at one point at my friend's house even. I played this game so many times that honestly, I cannot fathom anyone playing this game and thinking that it's dated. But again, of course, people have their own opinions. And like I said, I don't want to pay $80 for a remake of this game, but I'm kind of weird like that. I probably will. I probably will pay it. But one of the things that's kind of difficult for me is that if there's a hair out of place in this game when it's remade, or when it eventually does get remade, I will always recommend the $20 version of this game that still works today, and you can still try it out to this day. Of course, like, you can play any remake you want, and I love remakes myself, but I really feel like remakes nowadays are also used as discussion points and soapboxes for people to insult games that came out years ago that laid the way for many games that came out today. Remakes shouldn't be something that replaces the original game. They should be a new experience that you get to experience one of your most beloved games in. And that's probably what might happen with Resident Evil Remake, but we don't know what's going to happen, because if they do it like Resident Evil 4 Remake, I think it actually might be a good thing. You know, just don't change too much about it and it would be absolutely incredible. I really feel like people see remakes as things that need to replace the original and need to be better than the original. I can love both. Persona 3 Reload was fantastic. Does that mean I'm never going to play Fez again? No. Demon's Souls Remake was fantastic. Of course I'm going to go back and hear that original music in the Demon's Souls original version. I never played a Shadow of the Colossus remake. I only played the original version. Of course, they don't replace the game, and they shouldn't. And also, they shouldn't be used as insults to the original games either. Leon says, if given the opportunity, which would you prefer, a remake or a remaster? When would you prefer one of the? When would you prefer one or the other? Personally, I tend to prefer remasters, but in certain times, remakes are honestly needed. Pathologic 2 is a remake, and also a sequel to the original Pathologic, tweaking some mechanics for accessibility and the ease of play, and bolstering the story, but also fails in certain aspects. In the Yakuza series, the Kiwami remakes were a breath of fresh air that reinvented the series and carried on from the success of Yakuza 0, while being faithful to the original PS2 games remasters. However, sometimes they have their own issues. Majora's Mask remake deviated a lot from the original, and though it was easier, it also took what made Majora's Mask unique and forced it back into the same formula as older Zelda games. I think that you have a great grasp on this. To me, yeah, the Yakuza games are perfect remakes. I think Kiwami 1 and Kiwami 2 are great examples of this that actually like really made those games not only more accessible but more fun to play. I think at the same time as well, you also have Resident Evil 3 that got remade, and in many cases I think it was a lot worse because they took away a lot what made it really, really good and made it more like stagnated and stilted. And it feels very robotic in some cases too. Like the way Nemesis chases after you is way less spontaneous than it was in the original. And they do that because it's like a modern thing to do where it's like everything has to be scripted. And when games don't do that, it frustrates some players and then they get complaints. So they tend to keep everything to be very scripted. But I usually prefer remasters just because I love playing old games in the same way that I played them before, but in a new way is what I would say. Malcolm Condé said, Condé, I'll never forget finishing Pokemon Platinum for the first time 15 years ago already. It inspired me to binge Pokemon Red, Silver, and Sapphire right after. Your Pokemon Violet playthrough inspired me to get back into Pokemon, and I'm already 30 hours into Pokemon Infinite Fusion and loving every second of it. So I wonder, what was your experience playing Pokemon Silver for the first time, and what do you think about the Pokemon remakes as a whole, especially those who port 2D games to 3D? Pokemon Silver was a magical experience for me. I got lost. I played it for months on end. It was very interesting because I never finished it until like a few years after I played it because I kept getting lost, and to me it was like the biggest world ever. Now when you look back on it, the map is not nearly as big as other games, but it was a massive game when I played it. If you're asking what I think about the transition from 2D to 3D, I think they did a really good job, but I still think the 2D games have the best sprites and have the best art style in some cases too. But Pokemon Violet is probably my favorite Pokemon game.